to this to contribute to this event. And yeah, I love Ukraine. I have a connection. I've been to Kiev a few times at conferences, brought my kids, even jammed on stage at the Agile Rocks conference, I think it was. I also have some connection to PMI. I've hung out with these communities from time to time, seeing how they've been kind of also learning many of the similar things that we've been learning in the Agile community. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And I hope we can get some donations to support you guys. I can't even imagine the horror and craziness that those of you who are in Ukraine are going through. So you have my sympathies. All right, I'm going to do this using no slides. I'm just going to share my Miro board. So where the heck is that share button? There, share screen. You should be seeing a Miro board. And for those of you who haven't learned Miro, congratulations, you're going to learn Miro today. Let me just share the link to the board, because this board is actually editable by you. So copy board link and chat. You should be able to see. Oh, this says host and panelist. I don't know. If one of you are hosts and panelists and this doesn't reach everyone, then please spread it further. I want this link to reach everyone. Yes, thank you very much. Cool. So this board, I'm going to be talking about Agile, kind of share my connection to how I got into it, and then reflect a little bit about the state of Agile, like where are we now maybe, and what are some of the important things that sometimes get lost in all of the buzz. So that's pretty much, this is the high level agenda. So I see some people coming in. That's nice. Your part of the board is here, down here. So feel free at any point to add sticky notes down here, or add sticky notes down here with questions, or just sharing your insights as we go. That's interesting to hear what your insights are. You can also upvote each other's. If someone has a question which you think should be upvoted because we might not be able to address everything, then of course, wait, why am I not? Can't I type here? Let me just check why I can't type. Hello. Can someone make a sticky note and just check that it's possible to type? Because for some reason I can't. Let's see here. Yay! That's unfair. Why do you get to type but not me? Maybe it's my font that's black or something. I don't know. Anyway, I gotta check that. Oh, that works. Oh, wait a sec. I think I know what it is. Is it my keyboard? Just give me a moment. Okay, never mind. I can't write, but that's okay. You can write, and I can at least draw, I think. Yay. Okay. So anyway, down here, feel free to add stuff. You can also upvote each other using this little technique. Click on a note, and then click on a face there, and you can add a thumb up, or click on someone else's thumb up. I'm going to use that to prioritize in case there are some questions that are more interesting or relevant than others. Same thing with insights. You can upvote each other's insights. But okay, enough boring admin stuff. Yeah, so Agile. Let's talk about this. I'm going to turn off your markers here because it gets a bit confusing there. Quick backstory. Agile nowadays, if you kind of Google Agile, you get drowned in funny buzzwords. And it can be a bit confusing. I know that a lot of you, or probably most of you, are working in companies that work in an Agile way, or at least try or think they're working in an Agile way. My personal story is really through failures. When I studied computer science, I took some time off and worked as a programmer. And then I continued working as a programmer on the side as I kept studying. And I was really surprised by the amount of big failures. Like often I would sit and write code in some huge project, and there's other people sitting in other rooms writing code. And then like after a year, it would be integrated. And only then would we see if we have any good product. And often we didn't. Often it didn't integrate at all, or it didn't solve whatever problem that the product was supposed to solve. And I was kind of surprised and a little bit disillusioned. Like, is this really the way it's supposed to work? It seemed like my code quality didn't matter because the product itself often just wasn't the right product for the problem to solve. So I was a little bit surprised, and what I saw, and in fact, what I kind of learned at school was that this is how software happens. This is how you build products, not just software. Some people write requirement spec based on customer needs. So here's an unsolved customer need, right? Sad customer, and we're gonna fix that problem. So we have a requirements team that writes a requirements document, and then right over there, and they hand it off to the next team over here, and they write a design document based on that document, and they hand off to the next gang. They write a bunch of code, and then they create some release, which is sent to the verification team, and they test it and make sure that it, fulfills this specification over here. And then they ship it to the customer, and the customer is all happy, right? This is, really nice in theory, but it just didn't, of course, work in practice. And that's what I noticed in, the hard school of reality, that this just basically, I have never seen this work, at least not for product development. Instead, what happens is basically everything takes longer than anyone would have expected, right? There's lots of confusion. This document is full of assumptions about what the customer needs, but most of those assumptions are kind of wrong. And then, of course, when we get the tests, the product is full of bugs, and then we get a lot of bug fixing, and then the deadline comes and goes, and then at the end we kind of have to do a rush job and just ship thing. And often, again, the chance of this product solving the customer need is quite low because these people are testing this product that was built by these developers based on their assumptions based on their interpretation of their interpretation of their interpretation of the customer's interpretation of their own need. So it's a long chain of interpretations. And at the end of it, it kind of looks like this comic, which many of you have probably seen, right? The customer wanted a swing. So they wanted the swing, and then, the project leader understood it this way, and analyst designed it like that. Programmer wrote it like that, because they were in a hurry, of course. And then the customer actually needed something different, right? So this is what I saw, and I saw it over and over again, and I was really I had this feeling that there must be a better way, right? This was in the 90s. And later on, I became an entrepreneur and started my own company, and I was hiring people, and I was a leader. And I realized that, oh my God, I have to figure out a better way, because I don't want to, I don't want my company to be like this, right? So I looked around kind of online and looked for communities and case studies and examples of success. And I found a very active community of kind of expert software people, and they were talking about things like cross-functional teams, things like pair programming and continuous integration, things that are like test automation, things that were very different from what I had seen, and it sounded very inspiring, and it just felt more logical. Later on, that group of people came to create what we today call agile. So I was lucky to discover that community early. And what they were talking about was a completely opposite approach to this. They're basically, what they noticed was that when teams manage to build great stuff, they don't work like this. They work kind of the opposite. They take these different people and they put them in cross-functional teams. So these people are still needed. These skills are still needed. We're not going to fire, people here, probably. Just put them together in cross-functional teams. And then they work in short cycles and ship something small. This is not going to be a finished product. It's going to be maybe only one feature or something. It might even just be a prototype. But it's done after a few weeks. And the customer is probably not going to love it because it's nowhere near done, but they can hopefully give us feedback. And we learn from that and then make it a little better the next couple of weeks, etc. And then gradually the product grows, kind of like a plant. And then continues like that forever. And this approach, this was like a pattern. This group called these things patterns. It just seemed to make sense. I started applying it in my own companies, and I found that it worked better, a lot better, and it was also more fun. Of course, we still fail sometimes, but when we fail with this approach, we tend to fail a lot faster. So we might notice here that, this is going to take too long, or this is the wrong product or something. So let's close this down or maybe pivot and make something a little different. Which means that yes, these projects fail sometimes, but they tend to fail faster so that they don't become big failures. And quite often you can pivot and turn it into success anyway. So later on I worked for Spotify, and of course this was part of their DNA kind of. So this is an example of a Spotify product evolving from early prototypes down here to an actual product, and then branching out into mobile and into cars and everything. But there was never, you know, a requirement specification for the Spotify product. There was never a project to make this product. It was just continuous evolution from early drafts. And that's the pattern that I see with companies that you know are really good at product development. So of course, a few years later, 2001, this thing happened, the manifesto, which you've all probably seen a billion times. I like to patch it a little bit. I like to replace the word software with the word product, because this has nothing to do with software. It just happens to be a bunch of software developers that created it. Just like, you know, lean has nothing to do with cars. It just happened to come from a car company. So working product over comprehensive documentation. And same thing with responding to change. Sounds very reactive. You just sit and wait for change. The best teams don't wait for change. They go out and they seek feedback. So they look for feedback by shipping off and following up with customers. One thing I'd like to highlight about this though, like there is no method called agile. You can't really, you know, do agile. There's no like set of practices or exact practices. There's just a bunch of fluffy principles, right? I can recommend going back to this old document, even though it's not maintained. It was just a snapshot of you know, one conversation, but I think almost everything here is super relevant even today. The only difference I would say maybe is that here they talk about face-to-face conversation, and I find that works also in a distributed format. It doesn't have to be in the same room. That's something we've learned through COVID, of course. But anyway, yeah, so this became a thing, and then of course there are all these frameworks like, you know, Scrum and Kanban, extreme programming, and you know, things like DevOps and scaling frameworks like Safe and Less. The nice thing is, like, although this can be very intimidating, right? All these frameworks, you don't really need them once you get beyond a certain level of understanding. You can cherry pick the parts you need, because all these frameworks, they're kind of based on the same principle. They all follow these principles. You know, even Safe, that receives a lot of critique for being too big and too detailed, fundamentally Safe is based on these principles. So as long as you don't go overboard and try to do everything in Safe, then the ideas generally make sense. And plus it's based on Scrum. So no matter what flavor of Agile you're using, these different frameworks tend to work quite nicely together. But yeah, I made a video called Agile Product Ownership in a Nutshell that kind of visualizes it like a circle here. And I like that metaphor. Here are stakeholders, here's a team, product owner, and then in the middle we have communication. And this continuous loop of, you know, like backlog being created and refined and improved, team continuously shipping, learning from that, feeding it into the backlog again. And you have this continuous loop of delivering stuff and learning. So can someone send the link again? Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, so I stumbled into this. I didn't plan to become some kind of agile coach person, but because I was early into this and I started writing some articles and books, I got sucked in and companies started asking me for help. And I helped them and I learned a lot. So I wrote some articles and books and videos about that. And then the past decade, I've been very fortunate to end up at some companies that are really good at what they do. So in contrast to my early career, where I was learning a lot from big failures, recently I've been learning a lot from big successes, and it's really interesting to compare. But yeah, that's kind of high level how I got into Agile. Believe it or not, I'm not really so interested in process. A lot of people think that I'm really, but I'm more interested in product development. I want teams to be happy and build great stuff. And Agile to me is just a tool to help create the context to enable teams to build great stuff and have fun along the way. The past 4 years I've worked at Mojang as a Minecraft developer and a gameplay designer. So it's been really interesting to go back into the trenches as a developer and designer to kind of live Agile. After many years of mostly training and teaching and helping others, I've been actually living and breathing this for the last few years. And my overall insight from that is that agile works. Like, it's not a silver bullet, but it is fundamentally a good way, I think, to develop products and services. It doesn't mean it's good for everything, but most of my career has been building products and services, and there I find it to be fundamentally a pretty good approach. So, okay, current state of agile. I don't have so many flashy pictures, but some talking points. It seems to have gone mainstream. Like a decade ago, like I would often be in a position where I have to kind of, try to convince people about working in an agile way. I hate convincing people. I like inspiring people, and then they can convince themselves. But I want to be in a position where maybe a small part of the company wants to be agile, everyone else doesn't know what it is or is resisting, and then I have to help explain how this might help them. That's not really the case anymore. I find agile seems to be almost the default. Not a lot of companies do it well though, but most companies, or I would say a lot of companies, seem to use this as their default approach. I looked for some numbers and data. It's hard to find unbiased numbers, but so I'm not going to put some numbers on the board, but the pattern I could see was that agile has become mainstream, and pretty quickly too. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why. Like one thing, I spent a number of years working at Lego, Lego is an interesting company because it's an old company, and it's a company that does physical products, right? Lego toys, and only the past decade have they started doing software. What's interesting, what I heard at Lego, because it was interesting to see how fast agile caught on and spread to all kinds of departments inside Lego, including the designers, people making the actual models. And so I was curious about why this amazingly successful company that's been around for like 80 years or something, why they suddenly wanted to change the way they work. And what they told me, especially the managers, was that we are good at waterfall. And I haven't heard a lot of companies say that, but they claim to be good at this, and I believe them. I mean, I'm not saying this always fails. There can be companies that are good at this. It's just rare, right? And it's hard. And what they told me was that this used to work for Lego because they were so structured, so systematic, but it doesn't work anymore, because being good at this doesn't help anymore if the world has become complex, more complex than before. So I have this picture here. Sorry about all the scrolling here. Yeah, this is a mashup of two different models, Stacy Matrix and Kniberg framework. Basically, like if you think of the world as like, to what extent do we know what the customers want, right? Is it clear and stable? We know exactly what they want and it's not going to change, or is it more like we don't know what the customer wants and it's going to change every day? So on that scale, right? Up here is more complex. Down here is simple. And same thing, to what extent do we understand like the technology or the solutions? Like we know exactly how to deliver stuff once we know what to deliver, or even the implementation is uncertain and complex. And it seems like the world is moving this way, because of things like internet, which makes everything connected to everything. The rate of technology development means that it's just things move and happen faster. A small change in like a company makes one change, and then in one country, and then suddenly all over the world, other companies also make changes. And then, of course, things like, as we see now with conflicts and wars, the world is just, things happen fast, and then whatever nice plan you had goes out the window. So it seems like complexity is becoming the norm for running companies. Product development has always been complex, but I would say it's even more complex now. And that means that, like approaches like the waterfall approach, they are predictive. They assume that you can look at the state of things, make a very detailed plan, and then follow the plan. That only works down here. And it can be a fine approach if you are down there. But if you're up here, it doesn't matter how good you are at a predictive process. It just doesn't work because you need to, your plan, plans are useful, but they should just be high level. Because no matter what you were thinking at the time, once you start working on your project, reality hits you in the face, and then you need to adapt the plan as you go. And that's kind of the nature of complexity. Inspect and adapt, right? So the world is more complex, and agile is an approach optimized for complexity. And this is why I think agile has become kind of the norm. This is why I see things like big banks that used to resist agile and now are kind of begging for help to become agile, because they realize that even big traditional companies cannot really survive unless they can deal with complexity, and their old processes simply can't. This is just my speculation. I don't have like a bunch of data to back this up, but I feel pretty confident about this guess. So okay, does that mean that agile is a silver bullet? Right? We all know that there's no such thing as a silver bullet or a miracle pill that just solves all problems. I haven't thought about that. That agile is a silver bullet if your competitors aren't. And I'm going to use a silly metaphor for that. This is from my friend Niklas Modig. I should write that somewhere. I forgot that. Can I type now? No, I can't. Is it my keyboard? I don't know. Anyway, so think about a soccer team, right? In many traditional companies, it kind of like, if running a company was running a game of soccer, what people are doing is basically trying to kick the ball out of their tent. Each department is inside a tent, a ball comes in, and then the team is like, oh, the ball is here, let's kick it out to the next tent. And that's kind of your focus, get the ball out of my tent. And, what happens when another team comes along, right? And companies are doing that, and one company comes along and says, you know what? Let's take these tents down, and let's instead pass the ball to each other, and let's all focus on winning the game instead. So we all see the goal there. We see where the ball is. We see each other. So let's pass the ball to whoever's closest, and let's try to get a goal. This team is going to win every match. They're going to win it easily. So in this comparison, then yes, this team has a silver bullet, but it only works until the other teams follow along. And when all the teams have learned to pass the ball and get rid of the tents, then agile is no longer a silver bullet. It's just table stakes. It's a basic requirement in order to start competing. Essentially, it doesn't give you a competitive advantage. That's kind of what I see has happened with agile. That it's kind of become the norm. You can't, just being agile is not enough to give you an advantage. You kind of need to do it well. So mainstream is a trend. Pragmatic is a trend. In the past, there was a lot more religion around, like, we do Scrum. And, another team is like, we do Kanban. And the third team is, we do extreme programming. And then they kind of, rant at each other, and they're kind of competing and say, my method is better than your method. You're doing it wrong. You should do it like this. I don't see a lot of that anymore. It seems more like people have taken on a more tool approach, thinking that agile, we want to work in an agile way. Scrum, XP, Kanban, disciplined agile, whatever flavor you're using, they're all fine, right? Take whatever fits your context. They're not competing against each other. So that's nice. There seems to be less religion around it. However, like anything that becomes mainstream, I sometimes see companies losing their core principles. They get so lost in details and practices and rules and methods and tools, so they kind of lose, why are we doing a daily Scrum? What is the whole idea of a cross-functional team? So that can kind of get lost. I like to use this. This is my mental model kind of Agile. I think it kind of like, there's a number of well, let's say Lean and Agile are here, right? I think of Lean and Agile kind of like cousins or siblings. And they have roots. They come from, very old disciplines such as systems thinking, complex adaptive systems, things like psychology, even some math like queuing theory. Old kind of systems of thinking. And that's kind of where Lean and Agile is rooted in. But the actual practices kind of spring out from these frameworks. So Kanban has its roots from Lean, Scrum has its roots from Agile. So I think kind of like a branch coming out of here, Scrum, and then we have these small twigs, which are the actual practices or the leaves, right? So daily Scrum, product backlog, and a lot of them are repeated, right? Almost all methods here would use something like a daily Scrum, but the exact format might be different. So what I think is important is, what on a day-to-day basis you might be seeing these things, but what you're actually, like a good leader in an agile company is going to be emphasizing this quite a lot, and kind of reminding people of why do we have cross-functional teams? Why are we shipping often? Because if you really understand the why, then the practices become quite easy. It becomes easy to figure out how to do them, when to do them, and when not to do them, and when to change them. Okay, let's see. Yeah, here we are. Okay, so another trend is, of course, distributed teams. Really interesting to see how this crazy experiment called COVID has forced all these companies who used to say that, no, we can't be distributed, we have to be in the same room. Suddenly they had to be distributed, and they had to figure it out, including me. The Minecraft team. We were all, co-located physically, and we thought that was really important, to be physically in the same room. But suddenly COVID came, everyone had to go home, we took all our physical boards, stuck them onto Miro, did all our meetings on Teams, and to my big surprise, it worked surprisingly well. In some cases, it worked even better in a distributed format, because things like having 20 people gathering around a board, that's actually easier to do on a digital board. Anyone can zoom in and see what it says. We don't need to worry about messy handwriting. We don't need to worry about someone else standing in front of the notes so I can't see it. We don't worry about sticky notes falling off the wall or the wall space running out. There's all these things that just are easier if you have a digital board. For example, you don't need to worry about not finding a meeting room or running out of office space. There's a lot of advantages to being distributed. There are some disadvantages too, though. Culture rot, I call it. After a while, you don't get to know each other as well. You don't go have lunch together. You don't happen to stumble over somebody by the coffee machine. And that causes the culture to be less strong. So it's important, I find, even when distributed, to find ways to meet each other sometimes. But yeah, my general insight is, no, you don't have to be a co-located team. Or more like, I would say, yes, you need to be co-located, but you can be digitally co-located or physically co-located. So digitally co-located means we have the same workspace online. We can easily meet each other online, and we work, often in the same times or similar times, so we can talk all the time whenever needed. So digitally co-located is fine. Hybrid is hard, is an insight. It seems like every company is trying to figure out a hybrid now. Like co-located teams, we understood that from way past, and it works well. Digitally co-located, a lot of companies have learned how to do that, and it works pretty well. Hybrid, though, yeah, very hard, because now you're in two different rooms, right? You could have, I'm talking to you right now, right? So we are all right now kind of in the same digital room, and this whiteboard is essentially the room, and you guys are putting notes up here, right? And in fact, I can even see you kind of if I press here. Like, there you are. Hello, wave, move your cursor. Let me see that you're here. Woohoo! Yeah, some caught on. Yep. And but if we're hybrid, then it might be like we're all inside this digital room, and then I have 10 people here next to me physically. They're not in the same room. They're in the physical room. I'm kind of in both. It's really hard to create the sensation of being in the same room when you're not, in that sense. Plus, you get very many practical questions like, where do I put a sticky note? Do I put it on the screen or on the wall? And it's going to be like advantages and disadvantages for someone, and it's not going to be entirely fair no matter where we put stuff. So I think we can figure out a hybrid probably, but it's hard, and we're still experimenting. More trends. Scaling, of course, has been a trend for a long time. Agile started at small scale, and then we realized that, wait a sec, it's the big companies and the big projects, they're the ones that fail the worst. They're the ones that need Agile the most. But how do you do it, right? This is some industry data that I've found before that shows that large projects in the past, they fail completely about 38% of the time, and they only succeed about 10% of the time. These are challenge projects that kind of somewhat succeeded and somewhat failed depending on who you asked. So huge, massive failure rate for big projects. Plus, about half the stuff we build isn't even used by many. These are just like 2 studies, but if you look at different studies, they tend to confirm similar numbers. We basically suck at big projects. So we need to figure out how to use these principles at scale, and that's been the big trend for, let's say, the past decade. But the meta trend I'm seeing now is that, like, frameworks started popping up, right? Things like, well, SAFe is the big one. Less is another framework, which is a little more lightweight. Even, I made this case study about Spotify, this video called Spotify Engineering Culture, and that somehow became a scaling framework as well, even though it wasn't even intended to be one, right? So some people use it kind of like a scaling framework. The trend I'm seeing now is that people seem a little bit fed up with scaling frameworks. It seems like they're useful to get started in some cases. Like we used SAFe at Lego to get started, and then we stopped after a while because it got too heavyweight. But it did help us move from A to B. So frameworks are useful, but there seems to be a bit of a feeling of, do we really need all these frameworks? Do we really need to follow them? And I think we don't. We can take ideas from them and be inspired by them. But unfortunately, scaling is so specific to different contexts. It just looks different. So I don't believe there is any one-size-fits-all approach to scaling. There are some principles, but I don't think one single framework will just solve that problem for you. So I made up this term, frameworkitis, the belief that a sufficiently big and detailed framework will solve all your problems. I should put the false belief. Another state is that, of course, software kind of came out of this, agile kind of came out of the software community, but the principles have nothing to do with software really. It's just that software is by nature complex, and that's why agile fit particularly well in software. But it's now spread to all kinds of environments, hardware development. You look at companies like Tesla and SpaceX are perfect examples of agile outside software and also at scale. It's insane how far they have got with their agile approach to developing physical products such as cars and rockets. So that's a clear trend. Discovery is a trend that when agile came about, it was really about delivery. Like, how can we get stuff out the door faster and then incrementally improve based on the feedback? But now that, if you apply Scrum or any, decent agile method and you do it well, you will be good at delivering stuff. Your teams will be delivering, frequently and getting feedback and adapting to it. So that's great. The trend now is moving more towards the fuzzy front end of the process. Like, how do we figure out what to build in the first place over here when we don't even know, we like down here, we kind of have an idea what the customer needs. We're doing incremental improvement. But in the beginning, kind of like this phase of Spotify, we have no idea, right? So we're experimenting wildly and doing a lot of things like, early prototyping and design sprints and stuff to really figure out we're not writing quality code in the beginning. We are trying to ship prototypes and mock-ups to learn. So that's kind of what some call the discovery process. And it seems like the emphasis is more like, yeah, we know how to deliver. Now let's get good at discovery. The good thing is that the agile approach fits very well with this. There's really no conflict. It's really more about, which practices and techniques are we emphasizing to get better at discovery. And a design sprint is a good example of that. You can look that up if you want. It came from Google. But it kind of a Scrum-like approach to very, very quickly iterating and prototyping multiple ideas. We used that at Lego also, and it was very useful. Okay. Since I'm talking to PMI folks, less projects. In the companies that I've worked with the past decade, mostly Spotify and Minecraft/Mojang and Lego, projects basically aren't really a thing. We don't use projects for product development, hardly at all, I would say. At Spotify, we had something like projects, which we called BET, but it really wasn't the same because the traditional definition of project, unless it's changed, if it's changed, then I apologize, but it was a while ago since I was reading up on PMI stuff, but at least, from what I remember, a project is a temporary nature, right? It's a certain number of people working on something for a temporary amount of time, and then you're done. And then these people move on. So the project model is great if that's what you're doing. Like this event, for example, that we're doing right now is a project in a sense, right? It's a group of people organizing something and it has a date, which is today, and then it's over. Those kind of things, that's where a project model fits. But a product, this is not how products work. A product is, okay, we need a team. first of all, but that team is not going to be disbanded after the product ends. The product doesn't end. We ship a version here, we ship a version there, and we keep shipping forever until the product is shut down. So where would the project be? Like, when did it start? When does it end? It doesn't really make sense. Especially, you know, the idea of having a handoff. I've seen some companies that use a project model, and they're like, now the product is done. Now we hand off to maintenance, and some other poor team has to take over, which is super expensive and risky, and just not a really a good approach to product development, I find. So yeah, the project model seems to be like de-emphasized, and in some cases eliminated in companies, at least for product development. There are other situations where the project model is, of course, useful. Those are some of my thoughts on the current state of Agile. If you want, you can add. How about this? Let's do this. I'll add a frame here. There, and I'll make it white. You can add your own notes there, right? And if there are any, you know, observations that you've seen about the current state of Agile, then feel free to just add notes inside this frame, right? Can someone write? If you can write, I don't know why I can't type. Just type. Add your own notes here, please. Okay, type that there. Thanks. All right. In the meantime, and it's okay to write in Ukrainian also if you want. I won't understand what you're talking about, but you guys will. Let's look at the time here. Okay, we got a few minutes. So some things worth highlighting from Agile. Let me see how much time I have. I got about 12 minutes, right? What I think is important that sometimes gets lost in Agile is how important it is with teams. That they need to be cross-functional, small, stable, self-organizing, co-located. Digitally co-located is fine, but it just seems that great stuff is built by these kind of teams. So worth emphasizing. I also want to emphasize the importance of knowing your real goal. For example, for me, it's usually something like this. We want to build something that achieves an impact. We want to delight our users. We want to build a sustainable product where we don't sacrifice quality or team health, right? That to me is success. If we manage these three things, we're winning. We're succeeding. This is not a goal. The iron triangle, it's a tool, right? Scope and cost and time. It's useful to manage those things, but you know, delivering on cost, on scope, and budget and time is not success. You could build a really horrible product and still fulfill all 3 points of the triangle. And vice versa. You can build a great product and not fulfill the iron triangle. So the iron triangle is not a goal. We shouldn't optimize for achieving this. We should see this as a tool to achieve a higher level goal. That's worth highlighting. I also want to highlight that, oh, this moved. It's exciting to have people on the board with me, because then, you know, random stuff happens, but I kind of like that. It's fun. It means I have to stay on my toes. So minimize the gap. Like, it seems that the core of all Agile methods is really the notion of creating an environment where the people making the thing, the product, are closer to the people using the product, and eliminating anything that gets in the way. So handoffs, intermediaries, people I have to talk to in between to get feedback from users, or time delay, anything like that. Anything you can do to eliminate or at least reduce the distance between the maker and the user is going to be almost like magic. It really makes a huge impact, and often doesn't cost very much either to do these things. So this kind of happens automatically when you apply methods like Scrum. But as I mentioned, you don't necessarily need a framework to be Agile. You can just apply these principles. Team of teams as a scaling approach. This is, to me, the fundamental trick for scaling. You can't make teams too big, right? One of the core principles of a team is that they're small, otherwise communication breaks down. So if you're going to build something big, one team is probably not enough. So you might need several teams. They need to work together. So I like the metaphor of a band. This is a picture I drew from Spotify. Think of each person here, each team as a band member. So guitar, drums, keyboard, etc. Each team or each musician is playing their own instrument. No one is telling them how to play their instrument. But they have to listen to the whole song when playing. Otherwise, it sounds like crap. So it doesn't matter if I'm the best guitarist in the world. If I'm not listening to the whole song when playing my guitar, it's going to sound like crap. And that's kind of a good metaphor for what these teams are doing. So they're each working on some part of the product, but they're optimizing for the whole. And that's how we need to integrate often so that we can see the whole product. I sometimes use this kind of little matrix to illustrate what I mean there. Alignment versus autonomy, right? Alignment means like, we are moving in the same direction. Autonomy means people can choose how to work. People can make their own decisions. So a common mental trap is to think that these are opposites, right? The manager's like, either people do what I say or they do whatever they want. And it's either or, and you have to pick somewhere on the scale. I find it a lot more useful to think of it as independent axes. So a culture with low alignment and low autonomy basically means do what the manager says. No one knows why we're doing what we're doing. You just follow the to-do list, right? Not very nice and not very effective. High alignment, but low autonomy, that's here, would mean that everyone understands why we're here, right? We need to cross the river because of blah, blah, blah. We understand what we're doing and why, but we're being told how to solve the problem. So build a bridge, and you build foundations, and you bring materials, and people are being told what to do. This works better, but it doesn't really, create an innovative culture, and it doesn't really help you move fast. So this is kind of the golden zone, right? High alignment, high autonomy. And the idea here is that the better you are as a leader in providing alignment, the better you are at providing a context, the more autonomy you can give to the teams, and the more they're going to make the most of that. So we need to cross the river because of blah, blah, blah. You guys figure out how. And now you have teams that are working together to solve a problem, but they're being autonomous and innovative. Real life example, this was when Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, told us that, hey everyone, we've solved, this was way back, we've created this wonderful music player that can help people discover new music. That can help people search, play, and share music in a super simple way. And that's great. But the product is useless from a discovery perspective. People cannot use our product to discover new music. There's nothing like a good radio or recommendation system in it. And half of our users want that. So that's what we need to fix. And I don't know how to fix it. You guys need to fix that. But here's why it's important. So that's what happened here. And it took a few years, but then Spotify finally nailed it and is now a really good platform for discovering new music. But there was no project for that. It was a bunch of teams that were inspired by this high-level mission. So aligned autonomy. Be careful with this here. You can easily fall into here. If you have a lot of autonomy but no alignment, then teams are running around in different directions, and the leaders are like, I hope someone is working on the river problem, but I have no idea. Right? So I'll provide one more and we'll have a few minutes for questions, but this is about the mindset of leaders, right? And I think a really useful metaphor for that is this with traffic systems. If you think of a four-way crossing with traffic lights, that's a central control system, right? So if a car arrives over here, who decides if I get to drive or not? The light decides, right? It's a central control system. I have to obey the lights, and the light is probably controlled by some algorithm or some software somewhere. A roundabout, that's a system built on trust, transparency, and self-organization. There are some rules, but they aren't exact. Like if I'm coming here, I have to give that car the right of way. But what if that car is here instead? When exactly does right of way apply? There's no line in the road. I don't know exactly where and when. So the rules are just a lot more high level, and it's built on trust, transparency, self-organization. We are aligned. Everybody wants everybody to get through this roundabout alive without crashing. It's a shared goal, because if you crash, then you're going to block me, right? So we all want everyone else to succeed, and we're going to collaborate to make that happen. And it works because it's transparent and we can see each other. Incidentally, these roads have fewer accidents, especially fatal accidents. They have faster flow, they have lower cost, and surprisingly even less space. The roundabout itself takes more space, but because of the reduced traffic all around the traffic system, all the roads into the roundabout can be smaller. And therefore, in total, it takes less space. There are some cases where these crossings are better, but in most cases, roundabouts are actually just better. And this is a good metaphor, because as an agile leader, don't be a traffic light. a lot of managers and leaders fall into the trap of they think they're supposed to be a traffic light. So they sit in the crossing and try to control who's doing what, who's going where, who gets to move, who has to stop. That just means you're the bottleneck. And you probably cause accidents. So instead, be the designer of the roundabout. You're standing on the side here. You design the roundabout, you set the rules, and then you stand on the side and you observe. You don't control traffic. And then if you notice that cars are getting stuck, then you go and you adjust the system in collaboration with the people getting stuck. And you improve the system, improve the physical layout or the rules or principles, whatever. But don't stand on the crossing, controlling the lights. Stand on the side, gradually improving the system, and then let autonomy do its magic. That's just a leadership mindset that I find to be kind of, how to really succeed especially in a product development context. All right, so let's see where we are. Oh yeah, we just breezed through this, didn't we? I shared the story of how I got into Agile, some reflections about current state, highlight some important ideas that sometimes get lost, and maybe try to answer some questions. Cool. So just a practical question. On the agenda, it says 10:50. Does that mean we want to break at 10:50, or does it mean that we want to leave time for questions at 10:50? What's the setup?
Yeah, that's about questions, of course.
Okay, cool. Then we don't need to rush with questions. That's nice.
No.
But of course, if someone does need to go on a bio break or something, we're done with the actual main content part, and I'm happy to just do questions. So you can ask questions here by adding notes. You can upvote each other's questions, which we'll use to prioritize. Or if you have trouble getting access to the board, you can put questions in the chat, but then someone will have to help move them to the board, because I'll be focusing on the board right now. It's also okay to unmute and just talk if you prefer. So let's see. Also, this is interesting. If you're getting any insights, things you're learning, it's useful to, you can just post notes here. How to apply Agile to e-commerce sites developing properly or property? I'm not sure what that means, but okay. Usually site has to be released in full with basic e-commerce. Oh, right. I understand the question. Yeah, so let's say I'm making a bank. Let's just take a concrete example, right? I'm making a bank. Sorry, I have a bank, but I'm making an internet interface to the bank, right? Or let's say it's a mobile interface. Let's say I have an internet bank, but now mobile is becoming common and people want to use an app, right? So this is an e-commerce system, right? I need to access the backend, etc. How would I do that in an incremental way, right? So traditionally, what many companies would do is waterfall. They would make a big specification, and then they would have this project that is unfortunately likely to not succeed. The Agile approach would be, first of all, of course, focus on the goal. All right, why are we making an app? What is the impact that we want to achieve? So probably the impact is we want more engagement from our customers. We want customers to be able to interact with our bank through their mobile, and therefore be happier with the service of our bank and be more likely to stay and get their friends to come in. Maybe, right? So happy customers is maybe our very simple goal. But maybe there's revenue involved too, right? Maybe we'll earn more money when people interact with our bank. So what we have to figure out then is, we don't want to build the whole thing all at once. We want to build something small. So we need to look at the customer needs and talk to them and analyze what is the most important thing they need to do from their phone, right? And we can make a vision. Maybe our vision is you don't need to ever open a computer. You can do everything on your phone. Maybe that's the vision, right? We never need to actually achieve the vision. It can be like, if this is the vision over here, right? Never have to use your phone ever. This is your current state, which is you can't do anything on your phone on this bank. So this is now, and this is vision. There, I can't type, so I have to write, which is horrible, but never mind. We need to figure out what is here. So by analyzing our customer needs, maybe we learned that the most important thing for them to be able to see is to be able to log in and see how much money they have. Just to be able to see, like, hey, did I get my salary this month, for example, right? Just log in, see how much money I have. That's it. So that might be the first release. And in fact, there could be a first even smaller release, which is you don't even need to log in. to see your money. You're like, wait a sec, that's a security problem. Yeah, we only use it internally for testing. But we do it to check that our app can talk to the back end, right? So you open the app, it says how much money you have on your fake bank account. That's it. That might be your first release. Maybe you can do that in a few weeks. If you can't do that in a few weeks, make an even smaller version. Make an app that has a green light that blinks if it can talk to the back end. That's all, right? Now you've created a walking skeleton. You have a client, you have a server, you have something that can talk between them. Great. You've now reduced a lot of risk, right? So maybe that's your first. And then over here, maybe you have something you can ship to a small number of beta users saying that, hey, you can log in, see how much money you have. Over here, you can make a transfer. Maybe over here, you can, start looking at your stocks or whatever. Maybe here you can open your family account. And you might never even reach the vision. You might never get to a point where everything can be done through the app. It's a forever project in a sense. But this would be the agile approach to, for example, in an e-commerce site. So it really starts with what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and how can we solve a small part of that problem while still aiming for the big vision. I hope that makes sense. Otherwise, feel free to tell me either through the board or just talk, right? This, of course, impacts contracts. This has a big impact on contracting. You need to write contracts in a different way. Typically, contracts are more about selling sprints or similar, where like the client is paying for achieving this impact by a certain date. They're not paying for receiving these 50 features, right? They want to solve this high-level problem. That's what they're paying for, and then you might get incrementally paid per iteration, for example. It's a different approach. But the most important thing is to make sure the contract does not freeze a specification, because we need to improve the product as we learn, and that benefits everybody. All right, I don't see thumbs. So if you do have an opinion on which questions are more interesting and relevant, use the thumb. The way you do that is basically click, emoji, and you can type thumb there if you can type, but I couldn't type. But yeah, I didn't mean to move that there. Okay. How do I establish this observation position and make people communicate when I'm already the central? This is a great question. So yeah, I am the traffic light. How do I make observation possible, right? People come to me every day and ask me to make decisions, maybe. There are some. First of all, this could take time, especially in a big company, an old company. The first thing I would say is really about. Actually, I would say it's two things. One is about creating a sense of agreement. Do people agree about, oh, you're in a small company. All right, cool. Do people agree with this general idea? You kind of have to start here. Because if they don't agree with this general idea, then people are going to be, angry at you when you no longer are the traffic light. They're going to be like, where's my traffic light? How am I supposed to know when I'm supposed to drive? People are crashing because of you. Get back in position, right? So there needs to be an understanding that we are going to try to get rid of traffic lights. Maybe I'm overusing the metaphor here, but so that would mean as a leader would basically be saying, I'm not going to be. You can, if you come to me and ask me make a decision, be ready. I might bounce it back to you and ask you to make the decision yourself, or at least suggest a decision. So see if there's a general agreement. The next step is, of course, to check what needs to be in place for that to be possible, right? Maybe you as a leader have information that other people don't have. That's why they come to you. Maybe you have authority that they don't have. So you're going to need to figure out, wait a sec, for this roundabout to work, I need to give people more information and more control. And you basically need to make like a backlog of things to fix in your organization. So how can I create better transparency so that teams have the context necessary to make those decisions? How can I create a better trust and accountability so that stakeholders outside accept that it's not just the formal leader making the decisions, and sometimes it's other people making decisions, and the formal leader is maybe just being informed, right? So, but I would say the first thing is establish an acceptance about the general idea, then focus on kind of transparency so everyone can see the context as much as possible, using things like, boards and dashboards and stuff like that. And then 3, work on accountability and authority, like give people basically more authority than they had before. So do you think that project management within product development is not relevant anymore? This is a yes and no question. I actually wrote an article. Maybe someone who can type can write that there. I wrote a article called "What is an Agile Project Leader?" I think. Let me check if that's what it is. An Agile Project Leader. Yes, there it is. In fact, I think I can paste maybe. Let's see. Nope, I can't. Okay, yeah. There's if you Google that, there's a link. What is an Agile Project Leader? You can find it easily. If someone can find it and put a link here, that's great. But the gist of it is that if you don't have projects, or if you de-emphasize projects, and you're building products, I would say that you don't need project management, you need product management. But a lot of it is similar. So the person is still needed. And you're doing the same kind of things. You're keeping an eye on the scope, you're keeping an eye on money, you're making sure people understand what's going on. Maybe talking to stakeholders. You're probably doing something pretty equivalent to the product owner role in Scrum, right? So all the things that happen in project management are still relevant. But they're just not done in the context of a project, with a start and an end and a fixed scope kind of thing. The difference, though, is how you do it, right? You're not going to be a traffic light. You're going to be doing less Gantt charts, less, handing out tasks. You're going to be more doing what I call agile project management, which is basically building the roundabout, right? Giving people context, creating clear priorities, and making sure that there's a process for continuous improvement, such as retrospectives. So yes, project management is still there. It's still a thing. But it's maybe not so much about projects, and it's also done in a different way than maybe traditional project management. But a common misconception about Agile is sometimes people think that you don't need leaders. And that's a really important and serious misconception, that yes, you do need leaders, at least if you're more than just one team, right? If you're just 4 people in a startup, you probably don't need any formal leaders. But if you're 20, 30 more, yes, you'll need formal leaders. They just might not need to take as much space as traditionally. Just to provide some interesting examples, though, at Tesla, I just saw an interesting talk by Joe Justice. They don't really have formal leaders there. They have leadership roles, and anyone can step into a role temporarily and then step out. So in many cases, that leadership role can change multiple times per day. So the role is there, but it's not a fixed person. So there's a lot of experimentation going on about leadership roles.
Henrik, maybe an additional question that I clustered with this one is that what is your stake on the current picture in the world, namely that the current economic crisis brings more fear to businesses, and businesses are turning more into before we start this risky activity, we do need to understand at least on the high level what it means for our businesses, etc.
Right.
etc. And versus agile, where my personally favorite principle from the manifesto says that all involved, I mean investors too, should be able to maintain the very high pace, either in delivery or in investments, indefinitely.
Yes. This is a great question. And my observation is kind of the opposite. If you look at where Lean and Agile came from, like Lean, for example, came from Toyota, right? Toyota was not a rich company. They could not afford the ineffective processes that they saw in the US for developing cars. Lean came because they needed to find more effective ways. And it's kind of similar with Spotify. Spotify was a small startup competing against companies with infinitely more resources. They could not afford big failed waterfall projects. You need to move faster. You need to start earning revenue quicker. You need to, in a world where there's more uncertainty and more risk, then waterfall is just unacceptably risky. So I think this is going to speed up Agile, probably for that reason. There are going to be some companies that make the wrong conclusion and think that, we need more planning, more upfront, because that's going to reduce risk. I think those companies are going to die out, because that really has the opposite effect. But yeah, it's 10 o'clock. I don't want to take time from the next. There's so many awesome talks lined up today. We should not miss them.
Right.
So maybe I should just end here. Thanks everyone for showing up, and really, these are really interesting questions. And let's have a really awesome day.
Henrik, does it make sense maybe that I will send guys your LinkedIn page, that if anybody has still questions not answered, they can ask you?
It's perfectly fine to ask questions. I might not have time to answer them, but
Yeah.
it's always fine to ask. And yes, you can send a LinkedIn. I'm also available on Twitter. You can find me easily there. And this board we can share as a PDF or as an image. I will lock it for editing, so it's after today. But during the day, you can keep adding stuff if you want.
Great, amazing. Thank you very much for your keynote and for your thoughts and for your time, of course, today, this Saturday.
All right, I'll stop sharing and let's move on.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you very much.